I was at a point where I was quite exhausted. I had done this for over a decade. I was looking for other options. I was
Even beyond the music industry?
potentially,
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
But that's when Ricky came along and made me understand. Said, no, Sam, this is the very reason why you need to be on the founder's seat, because you understand the problem better than anyone else.
Welcome to the New Build podcast presented by Bubble, where every other week we explore how the playbook for entrepreneurship is changing thanks to evolutions in AI, software, and culture. I'm Abhinav Narayan, video producer at Bubble, and on today's episode, I spoke with Sam Rudy, co-founder of ProStudioTime, a marketplace for finding and booking time in professional recording studios. Really excited to spread the word about ProStudioTime, as they are one of our Launch Lab participants, which means they're getting ready to launch their business to the world for the first time. It's really cool to speak with the founder on the cusp of such a pivotal moment in their business. And I spoke with Sam to learn more about what he experienced during his tenured history in the music industry, as well as how that unexpectedly led him to becoming a co-founder of his own software startup to solve the kind of problem only someone like him could know how to solve. Stay tuned for some announcements at the end of the episode, as well as our Bubble tip of the week. But for now, let's dive into my conversation with Sam.
My name is Sam Rudy. I'm the co-founder of ProStudioTime, and ProStudioTime is, in essence, a marketplace for professional recording studios.
How big is your team currently?
It's just me and my co-founder, Ricky, at the moment.
Awesome. Before we talk about ProStudioTime, my understanding is that you spent over a decade at, I think the company is called Milico?
Yes, Miloko Studios.
Miloko Studios, which it sounded like a dream job in the music industry. I understand that you were booking studios for big name talent and working with lots of different people and learning a lot. So I guess my first question is, what is a job like that day to day?
Well, it's trying to find suitable studios for artists all around the world. Think of it like this. Making an album used to be a very linear process a couple of decades ago. Artists were just music artists, and there was a very set schedule. So people would go into the studio for a month or two or however long. And once the album was finished, then they would go tour it, and then they would go back in the studio, and then they would go back out and tour it, and so on. It's very different today. Recording doesn't happen in a very fixed schedule the way it used to. It happens as they move around. It can sometimes even happen while they're touring. It's also to do with the fact that artists are not just music artists anymore. They can be fashion icons. They can be podcasters. They can be all sorts of different things. And this type of setup requires being flexible and having to record things as and when the opportunity comes up. Sometimes that might catch you while you're traveling or while you're somewhere where you're not familiar with studios, or you might not know what the best studio is for your needs, and that's when somebody like me comes in. I have pretty good knowledge, I would say, of recording studios around the world at this point. So rather than spending time trying to find the right studio, doing what's a very, very laborious process, then you just come to someone like me and I will figure out what's available, what's more suitable, and then present the options for you to decide on.
And how did you find yourself on that career path? Was it a surprise, or did you always know that you wanted to be in that space in general?
My initial approach was more on the production and sound engineering side of things, but pretty early on, I started to become more interested in the business side of things and in the music industry in general. The opportunity to work for Miloko came up, I guess, because of my background in production and engineering and having spent time in some studios. This kind of felt like a very appropriate job for me, right? Management side of things, but in the studio setting. And I just started as an accounts assistant, raising invoices, just doing the more mundane jobs, and eventually worked my way up to being a studio manager and an international booking agent. It's always good to start from the bottom, because it really does give you a good sense of how the business actually works when you're doing all the mundane stuff. All the invoicing, chasing payments, getting purchase orders from the labels, all this was my job at the start. And eventually I was, trying to find studio options, negotiating rates on their behalf, and doing that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I imagine starting from there also gives you a better perspective on how it's changing, because you mentioned like making an album that process has shifted so much.
Yes, and I was very lucky to be in a very unique position of being an agent for many studios, not just the studio manager, but also being the agent is, I guess, what I mean. As a studio manager, obviously, you develop a lot of knowledge in studios and how the studio booking side of things works, but you're limited to the context of your own studio, of that particular studio where you work. Whereas I had the possibility to see how this works in various territories around the world with clients from different territories around the world and different types of studios, different sizes, different, whether it was tracking rooms, residential studios, all sorts of different types of studios. So yes, I got a very good, very good insight into many types of studios and many types of sessions. In recording studios, or in the world of recording studios, it's a very atypical industry in the sense that they don't like to advertise rates or real-time availability the same way, say, for example, hotels do or restaurants do. So that's where it becomes very complicated to find the right solution, because in order to establish baseline information, you already have to start an inquiry with the studio. And when you're looking for studios in places you're not familiar with, you can't risk to simply wait for the one studio to get back to you, because they might just come back to you and say, sorry, we're not available. So what you're doing is you're inquiring with multiple studios and sending multiple emails. And before you know it, in order to book a simple session, you started 5 different email threads and sent 10 different emails per thread. That takes you to 50 emails just to book one studio. So can you see the size of, how ridiculous the problem is in this day and age? That's the reason why we're building ProStudioTime.
Awesome. I can imagine that getting especially frustrating if you're trying to book something for someone who needs to schedule something immediately. Why do they not advertise that? Why is that a typical practice?
I think it has to do with the fact that pricing in recording studios can be quite fluid. It can go up and down depending on the session itself. If you're booking a studio for a month, for example, for an album project, then you're taking away a big headache for the studio from a scheduling perspective. And because competition exists, they might offer you a more competitive rate to try and get the booking over the line. If you compare that to a one-off session, especially last-minute session, where people have to, it's all hands on deck, I guess, for whatever reason. Say, for example, there's a filming session and there's a 15-piece filming crew coming along to the session as well. That's a lot to deal with and a lot to handle. So that's when the price might go up. Then the other thing is that there's a lot of very expensive kit in these studios. So they want to really understand who you are and what you're trying to do in the studio before they say yes. It's not as simple as entering your credit card details and clicking on the book now button. So those are the main reasons why they don't advertise real-time availability and rates. They just want to understand the project before they say yes or no.
Gotcha. So this is the aspect of it that's frustrating you the most, even though, it is a very prolific job in this career, I imagine. So I want to better understand the journey that you had from seeing that problem and dealing with it every day to actually deciding, A, something needs to be done about it, and then B, I guess I'll be the one to do it.
Well, that's where my co-founder comes in, really, into the whole story. Ricky is not part of the music business. He's never been in the music industry before, let alone recording studios. But he's been in business before. He's got multiple exits, and he understands business better than I do. Yeah, this is my first venture. I was at a point where I was quite exhausted. I had done this for over a decade, and I thought I was looking for other options. I was pretty tired, exhausted, and wanting to find something different.
Even beyond the music industry?
Potentially,
okay.
yes.
Yeah.
But that's when Ricky came along and made me understand said, no, Sam, this is the very reason why you need to you need to be on the founder's seat, because you understand the problem better than anyone else. There aren't a lot of people who do this. There's only less than a handful of us, really. And as I said, it's going back to that very unique experience of having done this for multiple studios, different types of studios all around the world. Even as a studio manager, I'd say you'd have a bit of a learning curve if you haven't dealt with this type of inquiry and, this type of sort of global approach to studio bookings. So yes, I think, with over a decade of experience, having done this in a very, very manual way, I understand the problem very, very well. And I think that's the reason why I'm in a very good position to solve this problem.
So your co-founder is telling you this is something that you can do, that you should do. You are the right person for this. I was told by our team that your first reaction to the idea of building your own platform was that it would feel that it felt like it would be impossible. Is that true? And why did you feel that way, if so?
I wasn't aware of no-code platforms at the time. Again, it was my co-founder, Ricky, who had already been dabbling into Bubble and no-code, a bit of AI at the time, although AI hadn't exploded the way it has now. I guess one of the things that I thought was, in order to build a simple marketplace, this is going to cost $500,000 just to get started. How do you even justify that expenditure? And it's like, no. You can use tools these days that cost a fraction of that and get things started and get the ball rolling. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges. I just wasn't aware of how much easier it is to build these things today. I just didn't have that awareness.
So presumably he sends you some links, you open up some tools, Bubble being one of them, and you start trying it out. Is it overwhelming at first? Does it still kind of feel like this is beyond reach? Or is there a moment where it starts to click like, okay, maybe there is a solution to be found here?
For me, it didn't really click until actually quite recently. I would say there's always been a conviction that there was something here, but I was more convinced than I've ever been only 4 or 5 months ago, when I started to see that people were actually, when people were starting to, react very positively to things. I have to go back to Ricky on this one, because he's been in the co-founder or in the founder seat before many times. He could understand, traction and validation a lot more than I can, because I've not been through this process before. So things that to me seemed completely irrelevant, he saw as progress, and he saw as validation that, there is a solution to be found. The other thing was also to do with, you don't need to have every answer. You don't need to have, you just have to give it a go, get started. And then as people react to it, you react as well, and keep building the things and the features, I guess, that people ask you to, or that you start seeing are more useful for people than you might expect at first, right? So that's the other thing. It took a minute, I guess, for me, for things to start falling into place and understanding, okay, I understand what direction we're going in and what I think people need now.
So took a little while. 2 questions. That milestone of actually starting to get that feedback that's always a great feeling. That happened a few months ago. How soon before that had you actually started on this journey?
The very start of the journey was 2 years ago now, nearly. But we spent quite a bit of time just trying to figure things out, I guess, to begin with. We started developing, we had one initial actually, I could go back and say that the very, very, very first version of what we tried to build here, while we were just trying to figure out what was going on and what we were doing. So the very first version was built on Softer. We didn't even use Bubble to do it. And that was just a process of us trying to learn and understand what we were doing, to try and have something tangible to show to people, to and even for ourselves to just understand, okay, how would it look like if we did this and if we did that or whatever. We could very quickly see that Softer was not powerful enough for us to be able to build something that could scale a little bit more. So we switched to Bubble, but that was also a time when we were testing, I guess, we were trying to prove a specific concept of how we wanted the functionality of the platform work. So we developed a very, very basic prototype, way more basic than what we've got today, and put that out first, and got people to test it, got people at some of the labels to test it. That's when we started to get a little bit of initial feedback and learn about it and realize that, okay, we actually have to go down the road of building pretty much what's essentially a marketplace in the more traditional sense. And the development of that marketplace didn't start until just about a year ago now. So it depends on where you want to start measuring it from, I guess. The journey started 2 years ago, but the current product, the development for the current product started about a year ago.
You start building the current product iteration a year ago. Have you left your full-time job at this point and are all in on this? Are you still doing this on the side? There's always an interesting transition point for every entrepreneur in their story of, when something is doing well versus when like the bandwidth is just too much. Either way, at some point, people have to at least think about making the leap. Some founders never have to, a lot do. I'm curious where you are on that line.
I'm full-time on this. I have been full-time from the start. It's a lot to think about and a lot to do. It's really not possible to do if you're not working on it full-time. We're at a point now where the platform is big enough and there's enough things going on here where it needs my full attention. Both Ricky and I are full-time on the platform.
Well, I guess you mentioned a few months ago, you started to get first rounds of really positive feedback. What triggered that and what has that been like?
I would imagine it's a combination of the platform looking quite appealing to people for the first time. Also, the number of studios that we had managed to convince and onboard onto the platform. It starts to look like a real marketplace. We are actually already working with over 130 studios in our network and have about 75, nearly 80 profiles built already. So it's still not as big as we'd like it to be, but it's big enough for people to start understanding where this is going. I think that made a huge impact in people really being able to understand, oh, okay, I see what you mean. You're not just talking about what you can build. You can actually show us what you're building. And the names of the studios that I can see on this platform are very credible names. Therefore, okay, you're onto something here. And I think that probably had something to do with it for sure.
Are a lot of the people that you are convincing to join, are they the same studios that were previously, not being forthcoming with their availability and their prices?
Yes. The thing is, we've developed the platform in a way that works for them as well. And that's part of the reason why I think it works. We're not the first ones to try and build a marketplace for studios, actually. Quite a few people have tried before. I've been approached when I was back at Moloko. I've been approached about it a few times as well. But I think it's to do with the fact that, these people hadn't spent time on the studio manager's seat. So they didn't fully understand the dynamics of booking studios, and they didn't design it in a way that would work for the level of studios that we are working with. We've done it in a way that we believe is a good sort of middle ground for studios to retain control over their availability and rates, but at the same time helping users discover studios instantly, really, or discover suitable studios instantly.
Yeah,
so
sounds like a visibility issue that you've primarily solved, alongside with just a great user experience to connect it all together for both parties.
It's a visibility issue and a suitability issue as well.
Sure.
It's, through filters, you can find studios that are suitable for your session needs pretty much instantly. You still need to have a conversation with them about rates and everything else. But at the very least, we've taken out however much time you spend on Google finding these studios in the first place, then going through their website and trying to understand whether they're suitable or not, etc. We already give you that information straight away.
I said I had two questions earlier. My second question was going to be how, going back to the beginning of this. How did you and Ricky cross paths?
The way Ricky and I met was actually through our partners. Our partners have been good friends for many, many years. And funnily enough, we both met our partners on the very same day. So
Really?
yes. Eventually we got to know each other through them, and we were friends for a little while. I always knew Ricky was in business, and he was in the cafe business before doing this. So, he's set up and run various cafes in London and Lisbon and other places, and other types of business before that. And eventually it was just a day at the pub. They were visiting, staying with us. Ricky and I went down to the pub for a drink, started chatting. I just started complaining about how inefficient the whole industry was. And that's when Ricky was looking into no-code solutions, AI, and all the various things, and said, actually, Sam, I think it's much easier than you think to put this together. So maybe we should give it a go. And then once he kind of planted that seed, it took me pretty much 24 hours to go, yeah, okay, let's kind of do it. Let's figure it out.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So that was going to be my question, because I imagine that there are many different instances where people have conversations like that. Like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to do this? And I'm sure that Ricky was more persuasive than just, shooting the breeze and talking about, possibilities. But I think hearing that within 24 hours, something about it really latched onto you. That's always really exciting to hear.
Yeah, for sure. For a long time, I had this idea, or I always felt like I wanted to do something of my own, but I never knew where to start or how to start even. And in this conversation, Ricky came along and said, you don't have to know where to start. You just start. And then you just figure it out as you move forward. I guess that's, and that's what he's very good at just moving forward and always keep pushing until things start to happen. And then eventually things compound and you continue to build layers on layers and things start to take shape. So yes, it's been a very good and very necessary partnership. And I guess back to what you were saying, if there are people who are listening to this podcast and are in a similar position to mine, or in a similar position, well, if they're in a similar position to Ricky's, then they already know what to do. But if they're in a similar position to mine, I guess the best advice I personally can give them is to talk about it, to go wherever co-founders hang out and talk about your idea. If you're too afraid of people stealing your idea, then you have to figure out whether it's an idea that they can steal. If it's an idea they can steal, then it's probably not the best business idea for you to put together. The best business ideas are when you are in that very unique position where, you have all the information, you've experienced the problem firsthand and others haven't. That's when you can confidently go out there and talk to people and convince people that you're the person to run it. And others are likely not going to try to do it because they just don't have that advantage that you have. So that would be the advice I would give to anyone listening who might be in that position.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I've interviewed quite a few founders at this point, and there's always a couple of common themes that come up. One that you already touched on was get feedback early, like put it out there, get the feedback early. And that is the only way to really know that you are building something that will meet the needs of the users. And you said that was one of the things that you did right from the beginning. So that's great. But I think another one that I've been hearing that I've been particularly interested in is when people think about entrepreneurship these days, it can get a little over romanticized. Obviously, like when it works and even when there's, still a struggle to be had, there is something very cool and noble or badass about doing your own thing. But the downside is there might be a lot of people out there who are trying to chase the optics or the status of starting your own thing without actually figuring out what the problem is that they're trying to solve. I want to start my own business. I just don't know what it should be. And so I just thought it was interesting to hear you say that, like, if someone is out there who already knows about these tools and knows about these, you know, the ways of business, that they might already know what they need. I think they would know the technical side of things, but I think there is kind of something special that happens when someone who really knows a problem well meets someone who really knows a method for solutions well. And I think that it speaks a lot to your friendship and your partnership that you guys just were able to come up with that and within 24 hours really be able to know that you had something. And I think that's why it's definitely valuable to talk to people like you and hear stories like that, in case there is someone out there who knows these tools but might not. It can be valuable to hear, like, how powerful it is to find that unique position that you were talking about, where there are tools to do it, but this is a problem that only this method or these people can solve. I think that's always powerful.
Absolutely. And then on top of that, I guess, you know, that there's always things like fear of failure or fear that you might damage your reputation somehow by putting something out there that isn't good enough, and so on and so forth, which we all feel. We all have that feeling. I'm the worst at it. And I've for the last 2 years, I've really learned how to overcome those feelings and be less worried about what people might think about what I put out there. But I can't say this loud enough. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention in the first place. Okay. Nobody cares enough about what you're doing to just stop worrying, because if they don't like it, it's going to take them 5 minutes to forget about it. And eventually you'll get that feedback and you'll go back and you'll improve it. And then you'll be in a much better position to put it out there. And that's how we've done it. We started with Softer. It was super basic, not great. Then we moved to Bubble, but we built something that was a very, very, very basic prototype. And now we've eventually gone on to build something that is something that we're getting a lot of praise for. But that has come through iterations of the product and getting people to just give us feedback and tell us what they think and how they think it could be better. And you'd be surprised, if you know people in the industry, we're relying on a lot of the people I know in the industry as well. You'd be surprised how much they're willing to sort of stick with you and help you, if they value you as well. Some of these people we've the number of times I've said, hey, the new version of the platform is nearly ready. We're weeks away. And then, 2 months later, we're still not ready because we're still developing and we're, things have gone wrong or whatever, and go, no, yeah, definitely 2 weeks away this time. And again, and they're still there and they're still, using it and giving us feedback and calling us. So yeah, the sooner you can get to that position where you realize people don't care that much, just go for it and talk to these people, and they're going to respect you for trying to do something, for trying to, you'd be surprised. I think, I don't know this for sure, but I think there's quite a lot of people in that position where they're kind of thinking, oh, I wish I could do something on my own, instead of my own business and do my own thing, but they never get to that position. And in a way, they look up to you in some way, because you actually had the courage to go and do it and at least try. And if you fail, you fail, but you'll learn something from it for sure.
Absolutely. What is it like in those first months of, you haven't gotten the validation that you recently got, but you have an idea that you feel strongly about? What is it like to have to face that fear and learn that lesson of, yeah, nobody cares, but we can keep trudging forward? For example, do you remember what your first feedback was, whether it was the very initial tool that you built or even the initial prototype on Bubble?
Well, we're based in the UK, and in the UK we have the people are very polite. So they don't give you the feedback that you might get like you might in America, for example. I don't know if I can remember the initial bits of feedback, but I can, at least for me personally, it was very tough, very, very tough. many times when I questioned the whole thing and said, are we really onto something here? Are you sure? But eventually I realized, I think you're just overanalyzing it. And I think you're just, the reality is marketplaces are very proven business model that have worked across many types of industries, and that to this day continue to work and continue to offer a lot of value for those industries. And it's not just about taking a chunk of the industry, it creates additional value for these industries through exposure, through, lead qualification, through a number of different, in a number of different ways, I guess. So yeah, when you start putting very basic prototypes out there, of course, people who are not used to, who are not entrepreneurs, people who are not developers, they're used to using fully fledged product. And unless that's why you have to find those early adopters. It's very important to find those early adopters and get those people to tell you the real, they're going to be the ones giving you the real feedback. And yes, in order to find those early adopters, you're going to go through a lot of people who are going to go, this is not good enough for me. Yeah, of course, because they're not an early adopter, because they're not people who will subscribe to whatever it is you're offering until later down the line. So you have to just keep going until you do find those early adopters, and then stick with those people and learn everything from them.
So as the platform is growing, as you're getting more studios bought in, the marketplace is beginning to take on that life of its own. You did mention earlier that you start getting some more recognizable names attached to the project, attached to the app. And it must be incredibly validating at that point. I'm curious more in general, what it was like to get to that point, if there was any particular challenges that you had to overcome in order to kind of break through that, for lack of a better term, institutional seal, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I guess, going back to the moats you might have as a founder, because of my experience in the industry and the connections I already had, it was a little bit easier for me to be able to start working with more established names, especially here in London. And then that's what then allowed us to build the credibility when we started speaking to studios outside of London. So whether it was LA or New York, etc. And see, this is a very, very interesting question, because I think it taps into, or it circles back to, getting feedback early. So even if I've been in this position where I've dealt with high level bookings in studios all around the world, I don't have every answer. You can't rely on your own personal experience to build a product, because you will have missed things that other studios will have seen from other perspectives. So yes, there have been quite a few things, filters I wish I had built at the start and that we didn't, or certain bits of information I wish I had added to the studio profiles, things like that. But that's kind of the beauty of it. That's always going to happen. Whatever it is you're building, you're never going to get it right the first time around. And that's why every developer, or every good developer out there, is probably going to say, build as little as you possibly can to start with, because, and then take the feedback from people to build the following features. Yes, there have been quite a few things that have come up that we hadn't anticipated and that we need to build as we move forward.
My understanding is ProStudioTime is currently still in a closed beta. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that, I guess my question is, why not open the floodgates? What is the reasoning behind keeping it as a closed beta?
Great question. I learned that very recently through speaking to, a couple of people, but there was one person in particular who had a marketplace business and eventually ended up selling to Airbnb. We were speaking to them about ProStudioTime, and the one thing she kept saying was, why is this not live yet? So there you go. That is part of, that is me being too cautious about things, as a founder, and probably protecting my reputation, or probably just, having that fear of failure. that we all have, especially at the beginning. So it's still in a closed beta, but hopefully not for much longer.
However further you extend the closed beta, I am curious to hear, what are your next plans for the platform in general? Is it just about getting more names aboard? Is there a particular feature set that you want to go? I don't know. I didn't ask you if it's web only, or if you have a mobile component, or if you plan to build one soon.
So at the moment, it's web only. Our approach was always to try and get, I guess, people at a professional level to use it first. So people at the record labels, management teams, producers, and so on. Eventually, we will definitely build a mobile version of it as well. But while we test it and while we get that initial feedback, it's best to just stay on one type of platform. What we are currently looking for is, on one hand, professional studios. We are being a little bit selective about what studios come onto the platform right now. They need to be studios that we feel can deliver to a professional standard and to a professional audience of artists and producers. And on the other hand, we want record labels, managers, producers, anyone who wants to help us test the platform out and give us feedback to start using it. So yes, it will hopefully go live very soon, and people will be able to sign up and create accounts themselves and start using it. But if anyone, feels identified, if anyone feels like they belong in those groups I've just mentioned, they're very welcome to get in touch with us to start a conversation and help us test it.
Awesome. I like to end these interviews with a quick rapid fire section. Before we close out with that, I do like to just ask guests for their playbook for anyone else who might be listening who wants to do what you're doing. So in your case, Sam, what would be your playbook for someone who might be out there listening, who is recognizing, maybe they're hearing from your story, they're recognizing that they themselves are in an industry that has a problem, and they think that they might be the ones to fix it and to change that industry? What would be your playbook for them to do that?
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. Look, the best thing, or what comes to mind, is start talking to people as early as possible. You don't need a product to start talking to people. Start talking about your idea to people as quickly as possible, because you'll get some form of early validation very quickly. The other thing is, people love the energy you bring to the room when you are trying to build something new, trying to do something that doesn't exist, or trying to solve a problem that no one has solved before. So just by talking about it, you're going to start getting a lot of good responses. You'll notice that. That was my personal experience. I've been surprised several times over how positively something, or a meeting or a pitch has gone when I was going into that pitch completely ready to be rejected that day, because I was thinking, these people are, big studios or whatever, big organizations. They're not interested in listening, and talking to me. And just because you are trying to build something, just because you have the courage to go and try and do it, they love that. And that energy is very, very contagious. And all of a sudden they want to help. They want to get involved. It won't always happen. And, some people will kind of eventually disappear and not be part of the journey. And you should expect that, because most people are probably, that's what's going to happen with most people. But you will find some of that, or some of those people who will then sort of help you the whole way through, just by going there and talking to them. So I don't know if that's much of a playbook, but it's at least some advice of that, how to get started.
Yeah, I think it's great. Let's just close up with a little rapid fire. This is just a sequence of questions that I ask every guest. No pressure. It can be one word answer, one sentence answer. It can be a couple sentences, whatever feels right. My first one is, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Probably I would have to go with a plane pilot, really. My grandfather and his brothers were all pilots, so they all knew how to fly a plane. And that was very impressive to me as a young kid. So yeah, for a long time, I was very sure that's what was going to happen. Eventually I lost interest.
Gotcha. When you're sitting down to work, what are a few things that you need with you?
Big cup of coffee, number one. And I really like to work in silence. That is
Really
one of the things for me.
For someone in the music industry, I guess that makes sense because to some degree music is the job, and maybe that can be distracting. Or
Yeah, I find music, if it's melodic music and especially music with lyrics, I find it quite distracting, especially if I'm trying to read or write.
yeah,
I write a lot of content, especially for, for SEO purposes and so on. Obviously emails, etc. So I find it very distracting. If I do have some music, it tends to be classical music or something like that, where I can just almost tune out and have it in the background. But the best environment for me is complete silence. Yes.
I'm a similar way. I typically don't listen to music that has like melodies or lyrics. It's usually instrumental, maybe like background electronic. It's usually the kind of music that you'd hear in the background of like a video game, which is sort of designed already to be, you're trying to do a thing, we're not going to get in your way. So I definitely hear that. From your experience with it, do you consider Bubble a creative tool or a technical tool, or both?
Ooh.
I guess if it was a spectrum and you had to pick.
I would probably say it's more technical to me than it is creative. To me, it's just a means to an end. I don't feel like I'm married to any type of tech stack, or, I don't feel strongly about tech stacks. To me, does it do the job that I need it to do right now? Yes, great. That's about as much as interested I am in the tech stack itself. Bubble is for us a platform that allows us to build things quickly and try things out quickly without having to spend too much money on maintenance and other things. Bubble just takes care of it for you. So it's a great tool to prove that you've got a business in the first place. I'm aware that you can do much more than that. Bubble is a tool that can help you scale to, by quite a lot. And I think it's all about the developers, really finding the right developers. We've gone through a few until we found somebody that really worked for us. So I guess that would be my answer to that question.
With your career, both what you're doing now and what you did before, I imagine that you probably interacted with, of course, there's a lot of, big name talent that's booking these studios, but I imagine there's also a lot of incredible storied talent behind the scenes, engineers and agents and people throughout the industry who have seen a lot and done a lot and learned a lot. Is there a particular story or lesson or takeaway that comes to mind from that wealth of knowledge and experience that you've interacted with?
I'd say that at the end of the day, it might look super glamorous from the outside, dealing with all these high profile artists. But once you spend time in studios and, you get to meet some of these people, and if not, you're often in the same building as them, you realize that at the end of the day, they're just people, just like everyone else. And the best way to deal with high profile artists is to just be as normal as you possibly can be, is I guess my advice or the one takeaway I got from the industry. And I think you can maybe extrapolate this to the founder community as well. If you're thinking about reaching out to investors, for example, you might think that somebody is out of reach for you. You'd be surprised. As long as your idea is good and you've done your research, look for people who have invested in similar businesses as you. So for example, for us, it would be a marketplace. Do your research and find the people that make most sense to the type of business that you're putting out there. And you'd be surprised. People do get back to you, even very high level people.
That's great. My next question, a little bit of a hot take question. What is something that you think other entrepreneurs are not paying enough attention to? Or on the flip side, what is the most frustrating mistake that you see them making?
I'm in the creative space, right? In the creative industries. And what you see a lot of in the creative industries of other founders and other people trying to set businesses up is not pinpointing your idea to actual reality in a way. What you think is cool doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work as a business. I'm sure this is true in non-creative industries, and it's very true in the creative industries now, especially in music tech. 5 years ago, it was a time when you could go wild with your ideas, and people were willing to invest in very, very creative business ideas. That has pretty much disappeared now. Some of the advice we've had is boring is back, in the sense that people want tools that solve real problems for people. That's it. Focus on something that solves real problems for people. The bigger the problem, the better. The more capital those people with those problems have, the better. The more people who have that problem, the better, etc. Ultimately, it comes down to how much can you scale this business, and that will only come with, just kind of making sure that this works in the real world.
Boring is back. You heard that? You're hearing that in the music tech space specifically?
Yes.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, boring is back. Yes, businesses that solve real problems for real people. Very much so.
Cool. We didn't talk too much about AI, and I'm not sure if it has any role in the roadmap for ProStudioTime. And I, as someone who is from a creative and arts background, I'd be especially curious for your thoughts in general on AI. But my go-to AI question here is usually, as AI does more and more things, what is one skill that you think humans still need to be good at?
I might answer this question in a slightly different way. I'm not fully convinced that AI is, at least at this point in time, more than a tool. It's a very powerful tool. It can do a lot of very impressive things. But ultimately, it depends on how good the person using it is, like every tool. See, in the music industry, we've been through this quite a few times. It started with drum machines. Everybody thought it was going to get drummers out of business, and that didn't happen. Then synthesizers were going to do the same thing for orchestras, and that didn't happen. We're going through the same process now with AI music creation tools like Suno and other platforms where people think, this is going to make artists obsolete. No. Same thing with autotune and vocals. If everybody can sing, no, you still need to have talent. You still need to be able to sing. This is for sure a life-changing, game-changing tool in many, many, many ways. But whether it's going to be more than a tool at the end of the day, I don't know. I think it's just technological advancement in a massive way, perhaps even in a way that we've not experienced before. But still a tool that humans will be able to use and master. And at the end of the day, it will be as good as the human using it. That's how I see it.
My last question. What is the most memorable feedback or advice you have ever received in your career?
Most things fail because you don't stick to it for long enough. Iteration, just volume of iteration. It's not about making it perfect. It's not about having the best idea. It's not about being the smartest in the room. It's not about any of those things. It's about how often and how long can you go for doing what you're doing. And every time you do it, you get better at it, and then eventually results do come. If you are designing some sort of marketing campaign and you launch it and you press the button once and then you just sit there and wait for it to happen, that's not going to work. You have to do it time and time and time again, and do it for 12 months and then stick to it for 12 months. And then you'll really start seeing some results. You just have to stick to it. I guess, one very clear example of this is newsletters, I would say. Start a newsletter. No one's going to receive it to begin with. No one's going to subscribe to it to begin with.
Sure.
It takes 12 months or more or longer, maybe not so long actually, but it takes you just continuing to write that newsletter and continuing to send that newsletter for people to start hearing about it and subscribing and then building up your audience. So That's what I mean by most things fail because people don't stick to it for long enough.
Do you have a newsletter, or does ProStudioTime have a newsletter that you want to plug? Now that we're at the end, I was just going to wrap up and ask if there's anything that you wanted to plug and put our attention to.
We don't currently have one. We will start one very soon, I'm sure. No, I guess, if I do get the opportunity to plug something here, is check out our website. Unfortunately, you're not going to see the platform just yet because it's not live, but you can still get in touch with us. If you are somebody in the professional sphere, the music industry that books studios often, we'd love to talk to you. And just watch this space, because hopefully the platform will go live, bugs and all, very soon.
Awesome. Congratulations. And Sam, thanks so much. Pleasure to speak with you. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
If you want to learn more about ProStudioTime, check out the links in our show notes. And just a reminder, this interview was made possible thanks to our Launch Lab initiative, which turns the Bubble marketing team into your marketing team. So, if you are launching your own business on Bubble, or if you are planning on launching soon, we would love to hear about it. You can apply for a showcase story, video interview, or suite of Launch Lab offerings by filling out our story form, link in the show notes. Again, we'd really love to hear from you. We're always looking to speak with more founders building on Bubble. Okay, a few announcements this week. First, speaking of showcase stories and interviews, the Bubble Customer Stories Showcase page has just received a major update. We've heard so many incredible success stories from Bubble users over the years. These are real apps, real businesses with real success metrics and milestones. And now it's even easier to search through all of them. That includes our video interview series as well, which includes app tours, where devs and founders show us the cool apps that they've built, and even all of the episodes of this very podcast. So please feel free to check it out at bubble.io/showcase. Again, that's bubble.io/showcase. Second, our team has created 2 new step-by-step guides to help you set up in-app purchases for your mobile app. One for the Apple App Store and one for the Google Play Store. If you want to get started earning real money from real users with your own native mobile app, check out the links below. And last, Emmanuel's March AMA happened last week on March 11th. If you missed it, don't worry. The recording of that session, along with all of his previous ones, are available to rewatch on our YouTube page. We also always publish a recap blog article if you would prefer to read up on what you missed. Okay, those are our announcements. Don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you liked what you heard, please consider leaving us a review. Those reviews will really help others to find the show. And just to wrap things up, let's check out today's Bubble Tip of the week. Today's tip comes from Andrew Vernon, lead Bubble dev on our team. We've heard from Andrew before. You can use the defaulting to operator to quickly define what a text element should display if dynamic data is returning an empty value. So for example, let's say you're displaying different information about products in a marketplace: price, weight, quantity, title, description, etc. What happens if one of those fields is optional and someone didn't fill it out? Instead of writing out a conditional to check if it's empty every time, you could just use the defaulting to operator to quickly set that default value, which incidentally can be both static text or an alternate dynamic value that you default to. If anyone listening has a tip they'd like to submit, please feel free to do so, either by commenting under this video or leaving your top builder's tip, trick, or shortcut in a review of this podcast. So thanks for today's tip, Andrew, and thank you everyone else for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.